music to the noise, yeah, the mess we make. Machine Pun Kelly get caught in the fake. Facts and logic with a twist of jest. Strip it down to truth, yeah, forget the rest. Humor blows the lies right out of the park. Look beyond the shadows that set the dark. Sparks of laughter fire up the night, bringing clarity where they blur the fight. Cut through the chaos, yeah, the tangled lies. Machine Pun Kelly with a set of clear eyes. Truths and jokes gonna rock this show. Step into light where the real facts glow.
Hello and welcome to the Pun Show. Hope you enjoyed our little intro jam there. And today we are here to talk about climate change and whether it's actually real, which it is, but spoiler alert. Dr. Wysocki here is your PhD, right?
I have a Doctor of Arts. Yeah.
Doctor of Arts. Okay. And then you are you're an adjunct professor for sustainability at Southern New Hampshire University.
Yep.
So what does that mean?
I teach sustainability to undergraduate students. They all have to take as a first year course sustainability. So every first year student now goes through one of those classes.
What does sustainability mean?
So in a larger sense, it's basically how do we keep things going? But there's three pillars that fall under sustainability. That's economic, environmental, and social justice. So it encapsulates the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which include things like the right to clean water, the right to, and now I'm going to go try to remember them all. Climate change is one of them. The right to health care, the right to food, clean air. So there's 17 Sustainable Development Goals.
Wow. Okay.
that encompass basically how do we live, life on land, life below water? How do we keep this planet going to sustain all life, not just people, and have clean air and have clean water and have fair work conditions and equal pay, things like that. So it's a broad term, sustainability, but it encompasses a lot of different realms. Mm-hmm. So it's making sure that we have a good place to live.
It would seem like if we don't have other things living, we're not going to be doing so well either. So it seems like it's like one of those all or nothing kind of things.
We need the trees, we need the animals, we need the water, we need all. We can't live without it. We think of ourselves as outside of nature, or nature is something over there or out there, but wherever we are is nature. So how do we make it so that it's safe for all of us, not just some of us?
So first of all, we just want to ask if you are watching on YouTube and you don't mind, or if you're watching on Twitter, you don't mind, watch from the YouTube channel, because then it's annoying to Elon, and so it's just a chance to take a dig at Elon, but also because it works towards our hours. We're trying to get up enough viewing hours that we can get monetized, and we're almost there, but every little bit helps. So if you could, you can click on the link on my profile page. There's a link to my my YouTube page to bring you here, and it's also in my pinned tweet. So anyway, if you can't do it, it's okay to watch from Twitter. We're not going to be mad at you. But here's one of the things that I've been like really wanting to have somebody on to talk about is you'll hear like people will, you know, say that climate change is a hoax and that it's really just you know, that if you look back through history, you know, there's been times where climate change naturally, and then they'll like even point out to like the dinosaurs, and I'll be like, well, yeah, that didn't work out so well for the dinosaurs, did it? But the like, how would you respond to that kind of counter argument to, yes, the climate is changing, but it's not man-made?
Ooh. So let me take the high ground on this one. So yes, there have been times in paleoclimate, Earth's climate history, that the atmospheric content has changed, and that's because of the species that were alive at the time. So since our climate stabilized into what we know now, climate has been relatively stable. Yes, there's volcanic eruptions that can cool things off a little bit. It adds particles into the atmosphere. However, what we're doing is measuring the amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so, as like I was saying before we went on air, there's a lot of chemistry to it. So we measure the types of carbon that are in the atmosphere in the carbon dioxide. And there's three types of carbon isotopes: carbon-12, carbon-13, and carbon-14. Carbon-14 is the radioactive carbon that we use for radiometric dating, carbon dating. Carbon-12 and carbon-13 are the ones that we find in the atmosphere the most. Now, since the Industrial Revolution, what we found is that the amounts of carbon-13, which is a slightly heavier isotope than carbon-12, are decreasing, while the amounts of carbon dioxide are increasing. And that carbon dioxide has carbon-12 in it. Carbon-12 is only found, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say only found. Carbon-12 is what plants prefer to use for photosynthesis. So when a plant goes through photosynthesis, dies, decays, eventually over millions of years would become fossil fuels like we use in our cars, coal, oil, natural gas. When we burn those fossil fuels, it's carbon-12 that's being released, because that's what it's used for photosynthesis. So now what we're seeing in our atmosphere is less carbon-13 and more carbon-12. So that can be tied directly to the burning of the fossil fuels made from plants millions of years ago. It takes a very long time.
How do we know what it was before the industrial age? Like, how do we know it's growing?
So so paleoclimatologists, which I'm not one, so I'm just explaining, how they do it. They can use ice cores, they can use tree rings, they can use sediment samples from the bottom of the ocean. So essentially what happens is sediments get deposited in layers, right? And then they get pressed down, and this is earth science geology. So the carbon and oxygen levels, sink and get trapped. And then when they take the ice cores, when they take the sediment samples from the bottom of the ocean, depending on how much they have, they can go back by years. It's like tree rings are years, so you can see how much they photosynthesized in a year, and you can look at those to examine what elements you find in there. And so that's where they find all of these, that's where they get these calculations from. So they're able to use their, very fancy lab equipment, mass spectrometers, and analyze what chemical components they're finding in these sediment samples, core samples, ice samples. It's basically like layers of a cake.
Isn't that considered carbon dating? Is that what that kind of is, right?
Not exactly. So carbon dating would be to try to determine how old something is. So you look at the amounts of radioactive carbon. Radioactive carbon C14 has the shortest half-life. So that's why they use that for carbon dating. It's not exactly the same. They're looking for that radioactive isotope. With the core samples, they're just doing an analysis of what chemicals they find within those soil samples or ice samples.
So they
or
can tell, like 30,000 years ago, when this sediment layer was laid, they can measure what the carbon samples are in there to get an idea of this is how much carbon was in the atmosphere 30,000 years ago versus now. So they're not just guessing. It's like 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 on the internet they have the Wayback Machine.
That time machine, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a Wayback Machine for geography.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So that's more just, I hear people say things like that the only reason there's 95% of the climate scientists agree with it is because that's what they're paid to find, as though like the 5% that are oil scientists are not being paid to find a contradiction. Are you familiar with the literature that's supposed to counter it, or is that something you just is that, are those studies flawed that the oil industry does?
So the oil industry started doing their own climate experiments, and they actually confirmed everything that the non-fossil fuel industry scientists found. In let me tell you the right year, 1979, Exxon engineers. And I switched screens, so let me find you again. Hold on. Exxon engineers did their own research, and what they found and published was that there would have to be significant changes in the way we use energy in order to keep climate levels where they are now.
So it's like 95% of climate scientists agree with the other 5%.
Yeah. They all agree. The difference is, gosh, I can't find where you went. The difference is, if the fossil fuel industry put out what they studied, they would have to make changes, and they didn't want to do that.
Right. It was a whole misinformation campaign with ExxonMobil, wasn't it? Their research showed one thing, but what they publicly said cast doubt on climate change overall. So there was a lot of misinformation just coming from them because it wasn't profitable, to be honest about it. 100%.
Yeah. Yep. And the American Petroleum Institute was a large part of that. So in 1957 and 1959, Dr. Edward Teller, father of the hydrogen bomb, made speeches at two different, one was at the American Chemical Society, one was at the Energy and Man Symposium, which was a celebration of 100 years of the fossil fuel industry in the United States. He stood up and said, fossil fuels should only be used for transportation until we find another energy source. They should not be used for electricity generation because, and he explained at that time, because we can detect the types of carbon in the atmosphere. He did it really, kind of shortly and succinctly. We can tell what carbon's in the atmosphere. We can tell where it came from. We need to not use these, and we need to find alternative sources. So he said that in front of the American Petroleum Institute in 1959. So, Yeah. So when you learn this stuff, it's really angering. It's like, you knew, and instead of, but that's their whole profit, right? So instead of completely shifting courses towards finding a new energy source, they went the opposite direction and said, well, we're going to keep making profits. So how do we do that? You know, how do we convince people that, hey, they're not sure. Someone said maybe not, but, and in my belief, right? So my whole thesis was on how we talk about climate communications. And so I went back and looked at the beginning and kind of saw how we got here. So
Wow.
yeah, it's really kind of fascinating and angering at the same time. So the fossil fuel industry, the American Petroleum Institute, they put a ton of money behind climate denial, and they started funding
It's almost
scientists,
like
right?
they have an incentive to do that.
Right?
Right? Right?
Yeah,
$7
but
trillion
it's the
in
education
subsidies.
system that's doing it for the money, not the oil industry that is worth, I don't even, trillions of dollars probably.
Yeah. Well, they've gotten $7 trillion in subsidies, government subsidies,
Wow.
not including the profits that they make. So yeah, it's more beneficial for them to sow denial and doubt. So now they're kind of saying, well, okay, we can't deny it anymore. It's here. Look at what just happened this year with hurricanes. We know it's here. But now they're switching to a tactic of delay. So yeah, we know it's here. Yeah, well,
But
we're
they're
working on green
not
sources.
really following, kind of.
Yeah.
So
They provided funding to scientists who would be doubtful.
no.
You always have to look at the funding source behind the science to see, is there any bias?
So one thing I've been reading about recently that surprised me is, and since you're specializing in sustainability, China's going gangbusters on solar and renewable energy, right? Like they're ahead of us in that regard. Is that right?
Yeah.
Like and what was it? I think, like, not counting transportation, like we're up to like 40% of our worldwide. For like 40% of the electricity we use now is sustainable energy, or is renewable energy, which is, like, to me, who I don't really follow the science that much, I was surprised to see it was that much, but also to see that we're not at the front of the world on this. To hear JD Vance talk, where it's all China's fault. But can you expand a little bit on where we're at with renewable energy, both as a planet and as a country?
Yeah, so there are some countries that are completely trying to remove fossil fuels. Like England just took their last, or the UK just took their last coal plant offline, so they no longer have coal. There are some places that are using natural gas, which they try to say is a greener-ish energy than coal and oil. It's still a fossil fuel. It's still not great. So the move to solar, the move to wind, more countries outside the United States are making that move. We are in the United States beholden to lobbyists and special interests. So a large number of Republicans especially get funding or donations from fossil fuel interests. So they tend to make decisions that are more beneficial to the fossil fuel industry. There's places in like South Korea that has solar panels over bike lanes along highways. So it is possible that we could make that shift, but because we still have the money and politics that is saying, you know, hey, maybe not push the clean energy so much, that some of our politicians don't want to make those moves. We have the ability, we just don't have the will.
So when it comes to like I've heard, when it comes to renewable science, what about people that say things like the cost of like the solar panel, to make the solar panel, the energy it's used to create the solar panel, or electric car batteries or whatever, that the energy is greater to produce those than that they save through using renewable energy. Like you need to get the for car batteries, for instance, you need to get. What's that?
Like the production of it. I think our video might be frozen.
Did you get for? Uh-oh. I think she did.
I did too. You're when she's able to come back, you're talking about the production costs of renewable energy. Aren't we still using non-renewable energy to do those things, right?
Right.
Yeah. And also, while she's gone, I just want you guys to know that the top candidates and politicians in the United States that received money from gas and oil in 2024 elections, they were, other than what Kamala's presidential campaign got, every single one of them is Democrat or Republicans. Ted Cruz is right underneath Donald Trump and Kamala Harris for $922,000 just for the year 2024 alone. Like, that's insane to me. The amount of money that goes into lobbying for that stuff is insane. So no wonder it makes sense why they don't want these renewable energies to exist, or for us to continue to perpetuate moving in that direction, you know.
So Neverfall, as always, has interesting things to say. I expose climate scientists, to be honest. Many are actors, proven. I'm not gonna. Anyway, I'm guessing there's some that you have in mind, but I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. But the question, is she on renewables? I am 95% on net zero carbon. So how would you, like, not everybody, like, I want to be on renewable energy, but I don't have $50,000 to go out and buy solar panels for my house.
Right.
How would you recommend people that want to be on renewable energy can be on renewable energy if they don't have the money to buy solar panels? Neverfall.
Yeah.
Like, that's an actual question.
She's also she's a college professor.
Yeah. College professors, by the way, are very poor.
Yeah.
How you gotta, I had like 5 different people come out, and I could not get a solar system for $1,100. Okay, she's back. So we've got
joining from my phone. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. No worries.
You looked very stoic for a couple seconds there.
Sorry about that.
All good.
So
we were talking about the cost of production, the argument about moving to renewable energy, the cost
to gather the resources to make a car battery, for instance, like an electric car battery, like the energy cost of getting that battery is greater than what it will save. Have you looked into that at all, or do you know if there's any evidence to back that up, or do you know what I'm saying?
So I haven't done an in-depth analysis of the costs of pulling out renewable versus non-renewable resources. But there's a cost to every energy source that we use. You know, if we look at what they're doing now with, say, the tar sands in Alberta, Canada, right? You're removing a whole swath of ancient forests to get a little bit of oil out of the tar sands. So what's the cost to the planet for that? right? So, there's always a cost. You have to evaluate the pros and cons of what the costs are, and the larger impact that they're having to the planet. Old growth forests are sinks for a significant amount of carbon dioxide. So when you cut down those trees, you're releasing that carbon dioxide, and then you start digging up the soil, the tar sands, to get the oil out. So then we're going to burn that carbon dioxide, or we're going to burn those fossil fuels and get carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So you've now added the carbon from the trees that you cut down, plus the carbon that you're going to use or create from burning the fossil fuels. How much money did you spend to cut down those trees to pull that oil out? There's always a cost. So it depends on what costs you're looking at. We look at the oil spills that we've had that have done significant damage to ecosystems and killed thousands of organisms. So, we're having now to drill deeper for oil, which costs more. So there's always a cost, right? Now, the fossil fuels, when we burn them, are polluting our atmosphere. The solar panels are not. Right. So even if I spend the same amount to get the resources that I'm using to make the solar panels, I'm still spending money to get the resources to make the fossil fuels, the oil, the plastics, whatever. Now the difference is what are those two different energy sources doing as a result? So solar energy is making electricity, but it's not polluting anything. Fossil fuels are adding carbon dioxide, which are warming our planet. So, there's good and bad with everything. So if you're only going to look at the bad of using, solar energy, well, let's look at the bad of using fossil fuels too.
That,
I think the pros list, the cons list for each of those, I think we all know which one has the least amount of cons on that list.
Right. And yes, I know that it's very problematic where we get the minerals for solar energy, for solar panels. It's problematic. It's also problematic what we're doing with oil.
And I also think that where we are is not where we are going to be. Like we can continue to improve on those things. So it's like to assume that in 10 years we're still going to have the same cost of those things that we do now is, especially if we're like really pursuing that. Like the idea that we shouldn't pursue it because right now there's this cost to it. It's like, no, that's all the more reason to invest in pursuing the cost to it, or into pursuing how to make it. So this is something, I don't know if you know what he's talking about here, but Never Fall Media, he's one of our regulars, and he usually has some interesting things to say. He says batteries are made from hemp in 2024, and hemp is also a biofuel. Cannabis is the solution to transportation. Now, I'm familiar with cannabis as a certain type of biofuel, like a personal biofuel in the form of gummies. But do you know anything about that, or?
I haven't seen about batteries being made from hemp yet. I did see an article about batteries being made from salt in China.
Wow.
Yeah. Would it surprise me? No. There's so much research into sustainability type fields right now and alternative energy sources. So it's it's difficult to stay up on every latest development. Plants like bamboo grow really fast, faster than trees. So anything that we can do to not cut trees would be fantastic.
I know there's like I've seen cars that like run on canola oil or whatever, like vegetable oil. Could that turn into like you just go to the gas station and fill up on vegetable oil? and you have vegetable oil stations, or is there
So the
limitations
oils,
to how much you can use that?
um,
Because
my
we could do with less
understanding,
corn in this world, as far as I'm concerned.
yeah, my understanding of the, so the engines have to be modified. My understanding is, I'm not a car person.
Well, but I mean, like, if you were just to start manufacturing cars to run on biofuel instead of actual fuel.
Well, yeah, so they consider the ethanol in gas a biofuel too. So that's from corn, right?
Mhm.
So ethanol is another form of that. Could it go full scale? That again would have to be something that the fossil fuel industry would have to be willing to, you know, um, let go a little bit of their hold on that. Hydrogen is another source, and there were some hydrogen cars made a few years ago, but you could only get them in California. So the next issue with that becomes infrastructure. So we have the infrastructure for the gas stations. So how do you, how do you then add in these alternative fuel sources of hydrogen, a biofuel only kind of fuel, and then have the cars being able to handle those. So I only saw like one car that could handle hydrogen, and I know NASA has a prototype of a car that runs on hydrogen. But then people get scared, because they think about the Hindenburg.
Mhm.
So, they don't want to blow up, and that's reasonable. So, for hydrogen to become fully useful would, I think, take a lot of getting over people's fears.
Yeah,
But
we see
as far as
Tesla's showing up all the time right now, so people are still driving them.
yeah,
Cybertrucks all the time too. So,
yeah, right. So there's, some more things would have to happen, I think, to get biofuels more adapted into society, but availability is going to be the biggest issue. Like if I live on the East Coast, if I got a hydrogen car, I wouldn't be able to fill it up because there's no
Mhm.
place near me. So what would I do with it, right? Like I would love to have an alternative source car like that, but when I'm limited to what's available, there has to be improvements in the infrastructure to get where we need to be.
right.
Never Fall says that water shortages uh, might impact that. Like hydrogen anyway. But I was just thinking, I don't know. I'm an idiot, so maybe I'm wrong. But if China is figuring out ways to use salt for batteries, couldn't you just like use ocean water, desalinize the ocean water, use the water for hydrogen, and then use the salt for batteries? I don't know. Just a thought out of my
On
ignorant head.
something.
It seems like just all you need is create, like, if we can't be looking at things in terms of, well, this is a problem. We have to look at, this is a problem that needs to be solved,
Right.
but recognize the problems. The problem I see with the oil industry and the Republicans is they look at every problem as though this is why we can't do it, not this is why we need to figure out how to solve this. Where it seems like most of the climate change community would say, no, this is why we need to figure out how to get around that obstacle, not deny the obstacle exists, but how do we solve that problem,
Right.
But because it's obvious, if we keep going the way we're going, we're not going to have, like civilization for more than a couple more generations, it would seem like.
Yeah, the thing that people don't seem to make the connection is it's not that we're trying to save the planet, it's that we're trying to save us. The planet will be fine, the planet will keep going, a new species will become dominant. The issue is, will people be able to survive here? Because we don't have another planet to go to. And if you think about what they would have to do to make Mars habitable, if the idea of going to Mars were to work, it would have to have an atmosphere. And what creates our atmosphere? Photosynthesizers, right? So everything is connected, but people seem to take us out of the equation, right? Like we don't exist without air to breathe. We don't exist without food to eat. And those come from plants. And so, you know, we're cutting down trees at record rate. You know, we love our soft paper, toilet paper. That all comes from trees, right? So the less tree product you can use, the less trees will be in demand. So that's why you move to things like hemp and bamboo that grow quickly. And actually bamboo removes more carbon dioxide than trees, but
Oh wow.
trees take hundreds of years to fully mature and become a carbon sink, right? Bamboo grows like what have I seen, like 6 inches a foot at 3 feet in a day.
Wow.
And so it takes all of that carbon dioxide out of, and it's a grass, right? It's not a tree, it's a grass. So it takes that carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. It produces oxygen for us to breathe. The more we can use alternatives to trees and stop cutting down trees, the better we will be. But in addition is the fossil fuels, right? Because when we cut down trees, there's fewer trees to remove carbon dioxide, but we're driving more cars, burning more fossil fuels, putting more carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. You know, Homo sapiens have never existed on a planet this hot. And it's getting hotter each year. And that's the thing that people don't understand is we don't exist separate from nature. So what we're doing to nature, we're doing to ourselves.
Right.
Interesting
I did not
comment
know that
here
about bamboo, by the
somebody
way.
says, Greg says, under good growing conditions, bamboo growth is actually audible. Like you can actually hear it grow.
That's crazy. Yeah.
My neighbors, I had some bamboo growing. I know it's invasive. It's super invasive. I know the only audible part I heard about when my bamboo was growing was that it was getting in their yard. That's how invasive it was. It just spreads like crazy because it grows. I knew it grew wild, pretty wildly, but I did not know. A foot in a day or in a couple hours. That's insane. That's insane.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we be using that, especially if it's creating more oxygen and would be better than cutting down trees that take forever to grow. Make that make sense.
Yeah, 100%. I'm
Also,
right there with you.
Yeah, I wanted to bring in. I read the article that you wrote for Medium. I guess maybe it was last year. What the Moya and the Lorex have in common. The reason I'm thinking about that is you talked about using a roll of toilet paper and how the tragedy of the commons is like, well, once one person starts using all that toilet paper, if they don't replace, if you run out of it, the other person's screwed. If you run out, if you use the rest of it, replace it. Can you explain like that like concept, like in layman's terms? I guess you did, but maybe just for viewers so that they can understand what that actually means and like how do we combat that, best practices and so forth.
Yeah. So tragedy of the commons talks about resources that don't belong to anyone that can be used. So think about going fishing. Right? You go fishing and you catch 100 fish. Well, if you catch 100 fish and, everybody just takes as much as they can, what's left, right? What fish are there left to repopulate? So it's about taking what you need instead of as much as you can, right? And I equated that to using the toilet paper. If you notice that there's 2 sheets left and you're like, oh, well, too bad for the next guy. Oh, so sorry. Then you're using everything that's there and not thinking about the future and what's next. So we have, in my view, a big issue in the United States of more, not enough. I have enough. I need more stuff. I need, we're getting ready to come up to the Christmas holidays and, how much more stuff do you need? So it's about keeping an adequate level to keep that resource going. But no one's responsible for safeguarding that there's enough there. So we build this social contract that says, you know what, I'm going to take just what I need. You take just what you need. There'll be enough for later. So it's all about that later, keeping things going.
Right.
One of our viewers here is asking about this. With he's noticed that a lot of times, like the leaders on climate change talk the talk but don't walk the walk. Like they talk about the need for us, like what you're talking about. They talk about the need for us to limit ourselves, but they are not living our net zero. They're not limiting, like they're not on renewable energies in their homes or whatever. Are you taking action yourself, or what do you say to that?
Yeah, so that's a good question and a good point. So my response is we do what we can, right? I don't own a fully electric car because, when I bought one a few years ago, I didn't have the money when, they were super expensive. The costs are coming down now, but the car that I bought gets like 44 miles to the gallon, and I drive as rarely as possible. So we do what we can with the resources that we have at the time. Some of them are expensive, and you may not be able to do things like completely cover your roof in solar panels. So you do it when you can, or you cut back on your electricity. So have I cut back on electricity use? Absolutely. Am I using less plastic? Absolutely. Do I drive as little as possible? Absolutely. Do I combine my trips? So do I park in one place at the shopping center and walk to every store? Yes, I do. And for starting in the spring, we're starting our own small garden. I compost, absolutely. Am I perfect? No. Am I completely off grid? No. So I do what I can with the resources that I have. I know there are some, like Dr. Catherine Hayhoe. She will do as many of her appearances virtually as she can, so that she's not traveling. But then when she does travel, she tries to make it so that her trip hits different stops along the way. So she's combining her trips. So we do the best we can within the systems that we have built. And we do make every effort to live as to walk the walk. We do our best.
Yeah. I think
But you're
though
not like living like a caveman. You don't live in a refrigerator or something like that. Like sometimes people act like try and go to net, like it means you have to, like have one set of clothes that you knitted yourself out of cotton you grew or whatever. It's not that everybody needs to be cavemen and hermits. It's just that we need to take the steps, kind of like taking the kind of steps you're talking about would have a huge benefit to the planet if everyone did it, which is what is getting back to your thesis for the Medium article.
Yeah, it's so, you do what you can. So instead of grabbing, a case of reusable water or a case of single-use water bottles, can you use a reusable container? Like that's a sustainable switch. So you fill up your water bottle as you go, instead of grabbing more plastic, which is made from fossil fuels. So it's those little switches that aren't like because people think living sustainably means sacrifice, and it's really not. Like one big switch that I made that I actually absolutely love is to shampoo bars and conditioners. So I do not have plastic in my shower. but you know, my hair is just as soft and as silky, you know, as when I was using bottled shampoo and conditioner. You know, it's little switches like that, that if we can reduce our use of plastic, which comes from fossil fuels, the demand for fossil fuels on that end at least will go down. You know, plastic is a cousin of gas. And, you know, to me, that's kind of terrifying,
Yeah.
you know.
Wait, explain that, because I don't think a lot of people, like maybe some people don't know where where plastic comes from.
Yeah. So I had a big graphic about this in my capstone. So in the distillation process, gas is one of the products. So they take oil and they distill it to get different products out of it. Gas is one of them. There's and I'm blanking on the name right now, but there's a byproduct that's produced that's actually used in plastic, and so that's part of why they should be recyclable, but also why they're not, because they add chemicals to this this oil byproduct to make plastic. And then depending on which chemicals they put in it makes it recyclable or not recyclable. So, you know, one of the things that my students in my sustainability class talk about all the time is plastic waste. And one of the things they keep saying is, well, we need to recycle more, recycle more, recycle more. Well, hold on, let me say this right. Of the plastics that we recycle, fewer than 9% actually get recycled. So when we throw plastic into a bin, fewer than 9% of those get recycled. So they may end up in landfills, they may end up in incinerators, you know, in the ocean, who knows where they're going. But fewer than 9% of plastics, no matter how much we throw in a bin, actually gets recycled. And that comes from fossil fuels. So it's connected to climate change, right?
Now, this is not something I know, but something that logically makes sense to me. That is that the poorer you are, probably the easier it is to not live sustainably. Like it's cheap, it's expensive to live sustainably. Like you can't buy solar panels if you're making minimum wage. You can't, even though in the long term it's cheaper, because it's going to end up paying for itself, but nobody's going to give you a loan for solar panels at, you know, $7.25 an hour.
Right.
Then even like with what, you know, like with the renewable, the cheaper, you know, foods that you buy are in plastic containers that are not renewable and are recyclable and things like that. And then, you know, like even just, you don't have room in your kitchen to keep a separate container for recyclables, so you end up throwing them all in the same thing. How can people that are financially limited, how can they help?
Right. So there's a couple things to that question. Lower economic people actually have a smaller carbon footprint than the wealthy. So the wealthy, because they have, you know, big expensive cars, and some have planes and boats and yachts, and, you know, like this, who is it, the CEO of Starbucks who is flying for his commute. You know, the wealthy actually have the biggest carbon footprint. You know, they have the bigger houses that require more heating, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's actually the poor people have a lower carbon footprint. But yes, you're right. Not having a big income makes it harder to get these more sustainable resources like solar panels. However, poor are also more likely to use public transportation if it's available. Right? And public transportation is a more sustainable option than, you know, say 50 people driving cars one, 50 people on a bus. So, and you're right about the other part too, that food choices available in lower economic areas are often not fantastic, wrapped in plastic, right? So what do you do if those are your available resources? I would love to say that everyone should just have their own garden, right? I would love to say that, because then you're getting healthy foods and you're growing plants that are taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. That's not reasonable, right? To say that everybody should have their own garden. There aren't a lot of great options, really. And especially in a lot of those lower economic areas, oftentimes you see food deserts where there aren't a lot of grocery stores that have healthy options. Food banks are a great way that can make healthy options available in those areas. But then you need the people to be able to run those food banks and keep them up and running, right? So then you need the resource of money or donations for them to be able to get the food. We need to do a much better job at getting healthy food choices to where it's needed the most. There are organizations that are pushing for urban agriculture. So like to do some type of community farming within urban areas to provide healthy foods. But again, looking at like the availability of grocery stores, that's where the economics piece of sustainability ties in, right? Because then the companies are deciding where to put their grocery stores. So it's not that there's a shortage of food, there's a shortage of healthy food where it needs to be. So it's getting that healthy food to the people that need it the most.
Right.
What about like grow towers and things like that, like for people that live in apartment? I think like one of the limitations with gardens is obviously space. Like if you
Right.
don't, and there's even if you live in an apartment, there's only so much food you can grow in grow towers. And
Right.
I know, like in Texas, I've been trying to do a garden. I've got like I don't even have thumbs, much less like I would say I have a black thumb, but it's like I don't even have thumbs. Every time I had one successful year, and I did an above ground garden, and grew some nice tomatoes and some pepper plants and some things like that. And I looked up all the like how to do the where what do they call that, where you grow the companion plants and all of that.
Right.
But in Texas, like once it starts getting to be like 115 degrees 3 weeks in a row, it just kills whatever you're trying to grow anyway. So anyway, that's my personal problem.
Right. And that's the thing. Like I said, I would love to be able to say everyone should have their own garden, but is it feasible all the time? No.
And I think too, I just really want to say really quickly. So, we've been talking about who's responsible, how do we be more responsible in our sustainability opportunities. But like this whole conversation for me, and I know for people that are, Gen Z, this causes a lot of climate anxiety, right? Like in demobilization in regards to what you can and cannot do, because we're like, okay, who's producing the most carbon emissions, greenhouse gases? It's not your everyday person. It's the corporations, right? Like, of course we all want to do our part, but it feels disheartening sometimes when we're like trying to think about what we're capable of doing when there's so many different factors like accessibility and prices, like we're just talking about here, where we can't do that. And I'm just curious to know, like, how is that a conversation that comes up in your classes with
like everybody in America could be doing what they could individually, but if the oil companies are still putting billions of pollutants into the air every day, it's like what they're doing all by themselves is enough to make sure that your kids don't have civilization when they grow up. Like,
right.
I can see why that would be frustrating. Like, and I think that's where we have to get into, how do we even have this political battle especially in a day of disinformation where, you know, all they have to do is spew out another garbage fake report where everybody knows they're lying and pretends they aren't.
Right.
Is that what you're
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Mayha?
Yeah. I just was wondering if that's like a part of the conversation that you'll have with your students, or does that come up? And, you know, are there ways that you're, you know, what kind of advice do you give to people who are feeling like that? And, you know, how do you combat that feeling of anxiety?
Yeah. So there's there's a whole aspect of climate anxiety that people have, and actually it did come up in my last term with SNHU. That was one of my students was like, well, I didn't realize it was this bad, and now like what do we do? You know, what do we do? And so the thing that I remind everybody is that you have power through your purse. So if you know, and I'm going to kind of pick on a couple of companies here, so I hope that's not too bad. Shein or Shein and Temu
Fast fashion.
are awful.
Yeah.
Awful. So you can choose not to shop there. You know, if you find out that a company is, you know, has really horrible practices that you don't support them. Support the companies that are living the way that you want, or living the values that you have. And that's how you're going to affect change, is through the economy. Unfortunately, you know, there's a company that makes bamboo toilet paper, wrapped in paper and boxed in cardboard. So all renewable, recyclable. And the only place I can find it aside from the website is at Target. So, you know, I will purchase that product, right? Aluminum is infinitely recyclable. So don't buy plastic, buy aluminum. So you support, you show you make sustainable choices by the purchases that you make, and then the companies say, oh, I'm selling more of this product, I should be putting my money towards, you know, these efforts, and vote.
Right. Yeah. So vote with your money and vote on the ballots as well.
Yeah. I mean, right now those are really the only choices that the average person has, is how you're spending your money and how you're voting. You know, yeah, okay, great, go build a garden, you know, grow a garden if you can, but in some climates, like, you know, super hot ones like you, or in, you know, cold areas like Maine, they don't have much of a growing season. So what can you do? You know, I'm not, you know, saying everybody needs to become a homesteader or, you know, like build a greenhouse or whatever. So you do what you can within your resources. And so, you know, at this point in time, that's the best that we have. But until we get dark money out of politics, you know, we're
there's
unfortunately kind of stuck.
Yeah.
Neverfall points out there are 270 million civilian autos registered in the United States. Our military has 250,000 total vehicles. Amazon has 10,000. You are being lied to. Keep pointing your finger away from yourself. I think his point there is that that while, you know, like we want to say, oh, well, you know, it's the Amazon deliveries that are causing, you know, that are the issue. And of course, you know, like they're driving more than we are, but still the numbers don't lie. And, you know, I just did a little math in my head. If there's 270 million civilian autos registered, if each one of those autos, like say they average 27 miles a gallon, if they each drove one less mile a day, then that would be like 10 million less gallons of gas used every day. You know, like I don't know if that math is right, but I think that's right. That would save a lot of gas and save a lot of carbon. So you know, like even, you know, like you were talking about, just you know, parking in one spot and then walking to the different stores. Like there are little things we could do to even just trim off a mile a day.
Yeah.
The so there, I think there are, like, I appreciate his point that we can do, like, the mass action of the entire planet voluntarily taking steps does have an impact. So I stand corrected on that. You know, and like I got a Nissan Leaf a couple of years ago, about a year and a half ago. And when all the prices were going up, the gas prices, I loved not having any clue at all what the price of gas was. Like I was like, oh, gas prices are high. And you know, they weren't any different for me. They were, and you know, I was working from home. So, you know, I don't even use it that much, but and I would love to get to the point. I tried to get some solar, but it was too expensive for me at the time. I still want to have a goal. And this is one thing that I think that maybe people don't think of is like when they're talking about saving up for retirement or whatever. If you can get your house to where it is self-sustainable as much as possible, and this is, again, there's a certain factor in this that you can't get solar if you live in an apartment building or rent a house or something. But if you own your own home and you know, like we talk about saving for retirement, if the more self-sustainable your home is, the cheaper your retirement is. So it's like, it's, to me, I'm looking at it as another way of saving for retirement, is getting self-sustainable as possible. Having a car that I don't need gas for, having a house that I don't need to, you know, that can run on its own solar, rain buckets to save water, to save as much cost on gas, you know, like and you know, getting my monthly nut down by those kinds of things are also ways of saving for retirement, but they're also ways of saving the planet.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, Americans love our cars. You know, we don't have a good public transportation system, and Amtrak is our only nationwide train service, and it doesn't go everywhere. So we rely on our cars, but it also symbolizes freedom. And you know, like we look at having a car as I can go places, and you know, and in some regards a status symbol. You know, like, do I need a giant pickup truck V8 that, you know, or will a little car like mine that gets 40 miles to the gallon work just as well? You
or
know,
if you can afford the big F-250, why not just get an electric one? Like, and people worry about things like range, and it's like, as long as you have enough range to get around town. I mean, it's like, how many road trips are you taking a year, especially as you get older, you know?
right.
I used to, like, I drove from Minnesota to California in 2 days one time. I was 23 at the time. Now if I did that, I would die. I'd get like from California to Iowa, or I'd get from Minnesota to Iowa. I'd be like, I need to take a nap. Like,
Not doing
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. So there's a thing that's called Earth Overshot Day, and that's, each country is assigned a day in the year where we use all the resources that the Earth can regenerate in a year. Right? Did that make sense the way I explained it?
Mm-hmm.
So for America, this year, Earth Overshoot Day was like March 22nd, I think. I'm trying to pull that from my head. So by March 22nd, we had used like a year's worth of resources in the United States. If every country lived like Americans do, we would need 5.1 Earths to hold all of the people on Earth.
Wow.
So we have a consumption problem. So, you know, I'm not pointing the finger just at companies. You know, it is us. because we also love our stuff. So how do we shift that mentality to, enough instead of more, more, more?
Right. I think a great way to do that is to talk about like the urgency of the issue, and like, explaining what the timeline kind of looks like in order for us to continue to stay on this planet and exist on this planet as humans, as well as with the ecosystems and the animals and nature that we need. So can you expand on that idea of like why it's so important? Why does this generation have to do it? Why does all the people living now have to do it? And we don't have to wait for the next generation to do it. What is the urgency now? I guess like in current times, because we've had this conversation for a while. The numbers sometimes change. It's either speeding up a lot or they get crunched a little bit differently. But like currently, what do those numbers look like in regards to the urgency of the matter in regards to climate change when we're having these conversations to get people to understand how important it is to be doing that type of work now and that sustainability now?
So I just want to make sure I understand your question. When you're talking about what are the numbers, are you talking about like in years? Like,
yeah, like what's the predictive outcome if we continue going down the path of consumption and non-sustainability as we do? What does that future look like for us, and how long is it going to take for us to get to that point of no return? Because from what I understood was we were pretty much almost there, right?
We are.
Yeah. So I guess that's really what I'm looking at. What does the future look like for us if we don't make these really big changes and these initiatives in order to become more sustainable as a society overall?
So have you seen so thinking about Hurricane Helene here in the United States and how devastating it was to the North Carolina communities where it hit. But adding to that, all the flooding recently over in Europe. Have you seen the images out of Europe?
Yes, in Paris, France, I think it was, or is it in Italy?
All of it. When you see all of these weather extremes, they're just going to keep getting worse. So scientists have identified 9 planetary boundaries, right? Where it's like, we want to stay within these boundaries. We're already past 6 of them. And so, in all honesty, all we know is that what we're seeing now with like how Hurricane Helene went from a 1 to a 5 in like 12 hours.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I'm from East Tennessee, by the way. I'm 45 minutes from Asheville, North Carolina. The Nolichucky River is where I got married. So I'm very familiar with the devastating effects that had on a community that was not prepared for something like that at all.
Right.
So, terrible.
So my wife and I have talked about like if we wanted to go like where we want to retire at. And one of the places we were talking about that seems relatively safe from climate change was Asheville, North Carolina. Like it is not a place that you think of as like, being susceptible, but here we are.
Yep.
Sure.
So there is no place that is not susceptible to climate change. There's no place. So there will be impacts in some way, whether that means, hotter summers or colder winters, or, there's some way that every place on Earth will be impacted by climate change. And, scientists are doing their best to predict what, increasing temperatures are going to do. But it is happening faster than they thought. And so, one of the things that, I love scientists, but one of the things that they'll say is, this is what we don't know. And then that piece where they identify what they don't know gets taken as doubt.
Yeah.
When it's not doubt, we don't know enough. And as we learn more, we revise, right? So they're continuing to revise and update their predictions. But at this point, what I'm seeing is generally it's going to continue to get worse, like these extreme weather events that just, you know, kill thousands of people, destroy land, destroy homes. Like if we get to the point where sea levels continue to rise, and say we had the worst case scenario with a 30-foot sea level rise, the majority of Florida, South Florida especially, would be underwater, and Orlando would become like almost
So you're
beachfront.
saying it's not all bad news.
Trump said that. He's like, oh, you know what? It's fine. We'll just have more beachfront property. You know?
Right. But then where are those Florida immigrants going to go? And then
Right. Yeah, right. Exactly.
We'll have to deny them asylum, especially the ones that wear white go-go boots. But
Oh my goodness.
you know, you weren't allowed to say climate change. Now your state's underwater.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right. Oh no, now you're a migrant. Surprise, surprise. Yeah, the tables turned.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy.
So
But
I do want to say,
I'm sorry.
at
One
this
other
point
thing.
that at an hour we usually give like especially guests that have like jobs and stuff. We at an hour we give you a chance to, you know, like jump off if you have other things to do. We are thoroughly enjoying this conversation, not just with you, but also with our other viewers. So if you want to stick around, then we are more than here for it. But if you need to go somewhere, just let us know, and we can, you know, like we don't want you to be sticking on when you've got other things to do that are pressing.
No, I can stick around. I'm not teaching this term because I traveled out of the country. So yeah, I can stick around.
Nice. So I wanted to piggyback on what you said about the 9 to 6 or 6 out of 9. I don't remember the exact
planetary boundaries.
Boundaries. Yeah, I was like thresholds, boundaries. So of those 6 out of 9, I guess I don't know if you know all 9 of them off the top of your head, but I guess my main question would be of that is, of those 6 that we have gone over that threshold and that boundary and passed, how many of those are reversible? Do we know if any of those are reversible and we can fix that problem? Or are there any that are, you know, we got to the point of no return? There is no going back from the damage that's been done already.
Give me 1 second. So I don't have them memorized off the top of my head. I know, shocking, right?
There's only so much.
Yeah. So I'm trying to keep the frame here. So it is, here we are, 2023. So it's things like land system change, freshwater change, biogeochemical flows, bio meaning life, geo meaning earth, chemical flows, ocean acidification, which is the pH of the ocean, atmospheric aerosol loading. Aerosols are like the tiny particles.
Mm-hmm.
So can they be reversed? Yeah. Yeah, we can get them under control, some of them. You know, carbon dioxide used to be called carbonic acid, right? So it's an acid. And so when that gets in the ocean, it lowers the pH of the ocean, you know, which affects all the life in the ocean, et cetera. So yeah, I mean, if we can kind of get these things under control, you know, land system change is, you know, one of the things that we do when we're moving land, you know, changing the structures of the land. It would be hard to put those things back the way they were, you know, but can we do as little continued land change as possible, you know?
So would so for example, Hurricane Helene, it destroyed the riverbed in the Nolichucky in Irwin, Tennessee, and beyond into North Carolina. That land system changed. I know, like Hurricane Helene, I would contribute to the climate change boundary, but that it's almost like they kind of are paired together. So climate change caused land system changes because of the storms, and that river is never going to be the same again, right? And so that's completely upset the ecosystem that used to exist in that river in those specific spots, and it will be like that for forever. You know, there is some parts of it will never go back to the way that it has. So I mean, and I'm looking at the numbers here too, like 2009 we had 3 boundaries crossed, and then, you know, so 14 years later we're at 6. So it doesn't sound like it's slowing down for us at all.
No,
But the good news is you say we can pull back on some of these boundaries that we have crossed.
yeah. So we have the potential, but one of the things that so let me put this thought together for you. One of the things my students end up asking by the end of the 8 weeks that they're in my course is, well, what can we do? The best thing that you can do is talk to people, because people don't generally know a lot of this. And in many states, some aren't even required to take environmental science, so they don't understand how their ecosystems work. Talking to people and explaining, hey, this is why I'm making this decision. This is why I'm using compostable plasticware plates or whatever. Explaining why you're doing the things that you're doing. People don't know how to change it. They just know how they've been brought up, how they've lived, like what's available. So they don't necessarily think about how to make sustainable choices in the grocery store, for example. Or, there are things that we can do, and education and discussion like this is one of the first best things that we need to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Neverfall makes a good point. Catching water would help stop a lot of flood water and provide water to people. When one solution solves several problems, it's a good solution. It also saves us money. Erosion is devastating land. So that's like 3 different lands. What are the rain buckets? I can't think of the word, but like
The rain barrels.
Yeah, rain barrels for your own home. Like that's what we want to do, is have rain barrels, and then use that to water our garden, and then it saves like a few different problems. We don't really have a flooding issue where I'm at, but if you did, that would probably also help with that some.
Right. With Helene, it was the amount of rain that just devastated, the North Carolina, Eastern Tennessee area. That amount of rain in that time period might be hard to catch. But erosion is a natural process. It's going to happen, and you can't necessarily stop erosion. What they're talking about with land system change is man-made changes to the landscape. So, like I talked about earlier, digging up the Canadian forests for the tar sands, that's a man-made land system change.
Right. Yeah, no, that makes sense. I understand that. So, with, you should have conversations with people, they're, look up in ways that you can get with, local initiatives that are happening in your area that you can contribute and help get involved in. And we also talked about voting and how important that is, voting with your dollar, as well as on a ballot for politicians that are going to ensure that we continue to do better in our role within sustainability. Can you, what can you tell us about the role of the policies and actions that we currently have in place from the last administration that have helped us do those things and to improve? Or can you share anything about what the initiatives have been done so far that we did vote for and that have been successful in the last 4 years?
So one of the things that I saw Biden do just recently was some kind of, I didn't read it, so I am going off of what I saw in the news, an executive order making sure that tariffs on solar panels weren't instituted, as a way to keep the solar industry going. The Inflation Reduction Act had a huge amount of climate change initiatives in it. I can't speak to each one, separately, but I know that was our biggest investment in preventing climate change. There are many aspects, you know, that we need to address. So thinking about land system change, one of the biggest things that we change land for is cattle. The mass of cattle, livestock, well, let me just say livestock, is more than the mass of people and the mass of wild animals, all other wild animals. So we cut down trees to create grazing lands for cows to eat, to drink, milk, whatever. So those are things that can also be considered when you're looking at ways to prevent climate. So, I know that the Inflation Reduction Act was, one of Biden's signature programs, and I know that there was a lot that they did towards climate change and that, but I can't speak to each different thing that was in there necessarily.
Right. Yeah. So I do know about the IRA that, Trump says that he's going to ask Congress to repeal it. However, most of that money is actually for clean energy is actually getting distributed to districts represented by Republican members of Congress, right? So
Yeah.
who fully oppose someone who opposed the full repeal because they want to keep that money because that's a great way to win votes, right? But that one I think is probably going to do the most harm when it is taken away. From what I understand as well, we've gone in and out of the Paris Climate Agreement twice, right? So we entered it, we were taken out of it, and we entered it again when Biden got to be president this past administration. Can you tell me what knowledge you have in regards to if we get taken out of the Paris Agreement Accord again? What is the benefits we have now, and what would it look like if we step out of that agreement again?
Well, so America's supposed to be a world leader, right? We're supposed to be people, say America's the best, America's the greatest, we're a world leader. But if we remove ourselves from the Paris Climate Accord and all of the climate conversations, where are we showing leadership? Where are we taking initiative? And I hope it's okay that I go here, but one of the things that I found in my doctoral research was that there's kind of a right-wing echo chamber on climate denial. And it doesn't necessarily start with the politicians, Republican politicians, but they don't stop it either. So the research was done into who doesn't believe in climate change, because believe it or not, 85% of Americans are estimated to believe in climate change. And it's interesting to use the word believe. It should be understand, because it's real, right? So only 15% of Americans don't. So then the question is, well, who are those 15% of Americans? And research was done, and it showed that they tended to be Republican, they tended to be Christian, and they tended to get their news from right-wing media sources. So it's not necessarily that the politicians don't believe in or understand climate change, but that because their constituents don't, they kind of just go with it, So how can we take a leadership role if we remove ourselves from the accord? We're taking away our seat at the table,
Right?
and so climate, when we put something into the air, it doesn't stay where we put it, it travels everywhere, so it's not just an America problem, it's not just a China problem, it's an everywhere problem. And actually,
you mean air doesn't obey national boundaries?
right? Who would have thought?
Doesn't need a visa?
No. And it can't apply for asylum at the border. No. No. So, to me, I know that one of the fossil fuel companies, I don't know if it was Exxon or Shell, one of them, their CEO wrote an op-ed that was like that asked Trump not to withdraw from the Paris Agreement. So, you know, companies that are putting themselves on the right path to address climate change are still going to continue to do that because they know that there's a large constituency who want to put their money behind companies that support, you know, sustainable practices. So
Yeah, and you're right.
I think it's the wrong decision.
Yeah, I do too. So ExxonMobil's Darren Woods is the CEO of ExxonMobil and warned that you know, we need a global system for managing emissions. Like it's a necessity. I mean, the fact that you have a oil giant saying that when like they've changed their tone, of course, because again, 85% of Americans understand that climate change is real, right? And also, by the way, Kelly, is it the cognitive dissonance versus cognitive difference?
Disassociation.
Disassociation, yeah. Same kind of
When
thing.
we had a guest on that was a political psychologist that talked about, I had talked about cognitive dissonance, and she corrected me. Cognitive dissonance is not like holding two mutually exclusive thoughts in your head at the same time. That is cognitive disassociation. Cognitive dissonance is what's supposed to happen when you have cognitive disassociation, which is the feeling of discomfort that comes along with that. Like the, oh, wait, these two things can't both be true. I need to rethink this. Like that's what cognitive dissonance is supposed to be. Cognitive disassociation without cognitive dissonance is what the problem is that so many on the right have, where they like, you know, I'm pro-life, but I'm also pro-gun. Like, you know, that kind of thing.
Yeah, or climate change has happened before humans, but also we are contributing to it. Like that's the argument that they have inside their heads, and it's either they can't both exist or it's uncomfortable that they can as well. And so, you know, I do want to, you know, think about that because that's kind of the main goal here, right? Is to have these conversations with people that don't agree with us on these topics, right? Because we need to know how to have those conversations with them. You know, I don't know how familiar you are with the new appointed cabinets appointees that are coming in for the EPA, Energy Secretary Chris Wright, Doug Burgum, who is the Interior Secretary. Andrew Wheeler is going to run the EPA. He's a former coal lobbyist, and Barry Myers is going to run the NOA. You know, he's in, you know, sidelining climate science in favor of corporate interests. They all have some issues. So I don't know if you have any, if you're familiar with any of them, or if you know anything about their work that could possibly affect, you know, how the EPA is going to be run, what's going to happen to public lands, those sort of things where, you know, it's important to people, but you know, you have to know how to have those conversations with them when we know what's possible of happening with the people that are now being nominated for these top climate environmental positions in the cabinet. So I'm curious to know, you know, we talked a little bit about the myths of climate change not being real. We talked about what we can do, and you said talk to people. So when we are talking to people that do disagree with us, and we have all this stuff getting ready to happen, you know, when the new administration comes into office, how are we having these conversations with these people and debunking these myths and fighting the misinformation and educating people when, you know, that is kind of where their mind is about these kind of issues?
Like the kind of people that say, oh, we were supposed to run out of water and we were supposed to, you know, like, you know, they talk about how there was supposed to be,
they've been saying the world's going to end.
And, you know, there was the whole, the millennium thing with the computers and it's like, you can't point, like, it's like, if you point out to them, the reason we averted those disasters is because we took action.
Right.
Doesn't mean that we shouldn't, you know, anyway. How do you respond to those? That's a great question.
Yeah, so there was a lot there. So let me start with the appointees. And kind of for my own self-preservation, I kind of disconnected from the news a little bit after November 5th. So I haven't been staying up to date on appointees. I do know that a friend of mine works at the EPA, and she is terrified about whether or not she's going to have a job in a year.
Right.
So yeah, I know that that's awful. So how do you talk to people about climate change? That's interesting because a lot of people, and so these are some of my observations, and so just my opinion. People really need to feel like they're part of a team, right? And if you well, I don't believe in climate change, and I have all these people that don't believe in climate change right here with me. You kind of have to know each person individually and the things that they respond to, right? So one of the things that I mentioned was Christians tend not to believe in climate change. But it's interesting that Pope Francis released a letter or an encyclical called On Care for Our Common Home in 2015. And it is 180 pages of him explaining why we need to take care of the earth. And one of the phrases that frequently gets misrepresented from the Bible, and I'm not going to have the direct quote or the direct verse, but it's about how man has dominion over the earth, and people take that to mean I can do whatever I want. And so in 180 pages, Pope Francis said, no, that's not what it means. It means that you are supposed to care for the earth, that it's your responsibility to take care of God's creation, right? So if you're talking to someone who is, Catholic or Christian or, then you can say, well, Pope Francis says that dominion doesn't mean we get to do whatever we want. Dominion means we need to take care of it.
Right.
And so you look for those little ways that you can kind of gently nudge people into sustainability, because if you come at them with facts or data, like data doesn't change people's minds. Well, I saw and I know, and well, okay, so maybe you're at a state park and they're talking about how much they love the trees or the beach or the view or whatever. Then you talk about, hey, if the climate change, this little beach is going to be gone. So you find those little ways to kind of start gently nudging them into a new way. It can't be like you're wrong, because then people just get defensive. Well, the scientists say, well, okay, just is it that they don't believe in climate change, or they don't understand how it works? Because like I started with, how we know that climate is changing is chemistry. And that shuts a lot of people down, right off the bat. Like, nope, don't talk to me about carbon-12 and isotopes and protons, and don't talk to me about that stuff. So you find those gentle ways that you can make connections and help them understand. Hurricane Helene was such a catastrophic event, and and I used it in my class to kind of say,
the weather machines that
right.
Joe Biden released the weather machines. They won't believe in climate change, but they'll believe in weather machines. Like if we had weather machines, wouldn't we just use those to stop climate change? But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely 100% right. That's why I said you kind of have to know who you're talking to about it. There are some people who just can't ever hear the truth because they've been so sucked into whatever they're whatever information they're consuming, right, wrong, disinformation, misinformation, whatever category you want to put it into, they don't hear the truth no matter what. But it takes a huge shock to the system for them to understand, hey, maybe maybe I was wrong, and it might take something like all of southern Florida going underwater. I'd be curious to know how many people that were under Helene's path now might have a different story.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
One of my students dealt with 2 hurricanes. What was the one before Helene? So she was like back-to-back hurricanes in the last term that I taught for SNHU. So
And
there,
as now it's getting impossible to even have your home insured in Florida
yeah,
because it's so like
And-
the insurance companies are pulling out. And Neverfall brings up another good point, which is like things like solar save you money. So you could like tell them, you know how you could really own the libs? Use their own stuff against them and get solar panel for your house and save money, and that'll really show the libs. Like you're using like make them
that's
think owning the libs by going solar.
that's one of the things I talked about. Like my next car purchase. So, I just bought a car, 4 years ago, so I'm not in the market yet, but my next car purchase will be electric. And so then I'll be like talking to all my friends about how I'm not worried about gas prices. And,
Yeah.
so it's those little things like pocketbook issues are always going to get people's attention,
That's you know what I should have done is when everybody was like doing their Biden did this, I should have just shown a picture of my Leaf charging and taken a picture of that and said Biden did this.
I did this.
Yep. Which is funny
Only
because
problem with my Leaf is it changes colors every fall. Got to get in the pun every now and then.
yeah, absolutely.
I've got a mug for you, Kelly. I got to show you later. But no, so I think that this has kind of been a running theme with a lot of the conversations that we're having with the professionals about on the topics that we're discussing is when we get to the conversation of how do we talk to people about it, right? We had the last call that we had together was on abortion, and also we had before that the one about how to deal with your MAGA family on Thanksgiving. And one of these ideas that I've talked about with other people before is how the Democrats lose, the fight, right, for what's right and facts is because we go too scientific into it. We go into the facts, but we're not going into the empathic part where we're connecting with people on the level and where we are. And it sounds to me like you're saying just that as well with when you're having conversations about climate changes. If you come to them and talk about isotopes and carbon 12 and 13 and all these different academic words and ideas, then people turn off from that, especially, people that have, that they're the side that they agree on, they don't talk to them like that. They're not reachable in that manner. So you have to be able to reach them in the way that they are, you can hold their attention and get them to listen and have a conversation together. And so, it sounds like you're saying the exact same thing when it comes to having these discussions with people on climate change that, don't really see things for what they actually are. They say they don't believe, but really they don't understand. And sometimes coming at it in a scientific way is maybe not the best way, but I'm sure that years from now, I would love to go do some investigative journalism in North Carolina and in East Tennessee and see how that changed people's opinions about climate change if they were affected by that. Because if you weren't directly affected by it, you knew somebody that was, right? If you're from this area. And so I would love to see whose minds were changed based on having actually gone through that experience, in particular on the topic of climate change. There's surely going to be some academic studies and journalism work done on that.
So, and I think it's also important to realize not we look for like the uncle conversation where they cry uncle, admit we're right about everything, and change their entire worldview based on like one conversation. Those aren't going to happen. I think what we need to realize is that it's little things here, like little, okay, that makes sense, and they're going to change their mind a little bit at a time. They're not going to change it all at once, but that doesn't mean that all those little conversations are worthless. And so it's like if we can keep the avenue of communication open to some degree. And, sometimes you're not going to get anywhere, but sometimes you are. I've had people change their mind over time. And one of them married me. So my wife started off as a Republican, and then we had some long conversations, and now she's like a Bernie bro. So I might have done too good of a job almost. But anyway, I think we're at a good place to kind of wrap up here a little bit. I do want to, I have a small announcement to make. I've got a new whiteboard out on why or is abortion murder, which is Janet, in case you don't know, what we're doing on this show is we're having like a kind of a four-prong approach, a four-legged approach, if you will, and we have like a table. So one leg is to have people like you on that are experts that can like really address the issues, not politically, but just as the issues without making it a big politically charged thing. Then we'll have people that are affected on one way or another. That's why I want Neverfall to contact me, because he's really done a lot of personal action to adjust for climate change himself. So like have real world people that are really doing real world things, either, like we had for abortion, I had an OBGYN doctor that talked about, abortion and why she chose her career and chooses to perform abortions, even though it's only less than 10% of what her practice does. And then we had women on who had abortions. And one of the women was like, do I look like a murderer to you? And the way that she said that, really affected me. Like I really started thinking about if, women that have had abortions and been accused of being murderers and stuff like that, just how cruel that is to them. And so that's why I kind of chose that as the title. Then if you're familiar, I do these whiteboard videos that like explain things. And so that's the third leg, is to have a whiteboard video. And then I have a Substack where I talk about the process where I learned everything. So, like I'll do a whiteboard video on climate change. I'll have on some guests that like Neverfall that have changed their lives to address it. And I would also like to have some people on whose lives were destroyed by some of these incidents, to show that it is not just theoretical. And then the final thing is I have a Substack where I'm writing an article for each one. And Nehan will also have some articles on there where we address what we've learned through the process. We're not here to teach everybody. We're here to learn things, and we're hoping that people will join us and learn together. Because we are not experts on everything. That's why we're talking to people that are. And so anyway, the first table will be completed today. I've got the 3 interviews done. The 2 interviews done. I've got the whiteboard video up. I think I personally I worked like a month on it. This one is the whiteboard video I worked the hardest on. And so today I'll be posting on my Substack what I learned doing that. And so that'll be available to everybody today too. So we're really excited about that. And we'll, the next one up will be the climate change one. And for each of the major topics we're addressing on this, we want to have those, like the table, we're calling them, to rest your arguments on and maybe to be able to reach people with some of those things. So anyway, we appreciate you so much offering up your time and coming on and explaining things in such a clear way. You avoided at the beginning, like you said, giving chemistry lessons. So I never even had high school chemistry. So, I
hated chemistry. So
even I don't want to talk about it.
You have anything to add to any of that, Nehan, before we?
Yeah. definitely grateful to have you on. I just wanted to know. So if I don't know, I found your article on Medium. I found you on LinkedIn. I wanted to share once we're done with the show on Blue Sky. Anywhere anybody can follow you if you're writing articles or if you're posting on Blue Sky or Twitter or Facebook, or are you do you write articles for any other news publications online that people can follow your work or read or watch any videos from conferences you've done before? So or if you have a book coming out, just always like to get that information to share with our guests before we sign out, to give you the opportunity to promote anything you got going on.
Yeah. So yeah, I haven't been very active on Medium, as you saw. I only have a couple things up there. So I am, because I am working on a book. So it's in the works. It's in progress. But yeah, I am on Blue Sky. That's a lot of cat content, though.
I personally love cat content.
So that's a category 5 hurricane of cats or something.
It's a hurricane, not a hurricane.
Hurricane, yeah.
Hurricane, there we go. Category 5 hurricane.
Yeah, I try not. I don't do a whole lot of climate stuff on Blue Sky, but I do talk about sustainability once in a while. Yeah, so I will absolutely share any of that with you.
That sounds great. Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you.
I want to thank you again for coming on, and everybody else that joined on the call. You'll had some great conversations here with us. We always appreciate it. And find us on Blue Sky. Come follow us.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Awesome.
Thanks again.
See you guys.
Thanks for joining us, listeners, and Neverfall and Jeremy and all the other regulars. It's really encouraging when I see the same faces coming back.
Yeah.
It makes me feel like we're actually being heard here. So, all right. We'll talk to everybody later.
Yep. See you guys next time.
Bye.